QuaranJazz. Listen while you're home. Hello and welcome to the 17th episode of QuaranJazz, your weekly update on what jazz musicians from all over the world are doing during social distancing time. I'm Geisa Fernandes from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'm a singer, songwriter, music researcher, and I started this project 17 weeks ago when, this quarantine situation was kind of new to most of us. Since then, many things have changed. I'm still confined, but maybe you are not anymore. Lots of people have already returned to their routines. Lots of musicians are already having their gigs, or at least dealing with dates in the near future. So this show has become more than only a compilation of testimonials from people from their homes and turned somehow into a portrait, a document of the present history in audio format. QuaranJazz is part of a bigger universe, the amazing world of content that has been created during quarantine. I like to think that this content will help us to understand what is happening now, what we were thinking, what were our fears and hopes and expectations concerning this new normal situation. But whatever the future brings, I'm very proud of being part of an action that proves that even during those weird days, a lot of people kept creating. Amazing people creating amazing music. And if you want to know more about my music and the projects I'm involved in, including other podcasts, visit my website, geisafernandes.com. I will leave the link to it in the description of this episode. I would like to remind you that QuaranJazz is a proud participant of the Social Distancing Festival. Learn more about this action by visiting their website. Link also available in the description of this episode. My guest this week comes from New York. Singer, songwriter, teacher. The list is long. I'm talking about Andrea Wolper. Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for your participation. My usual first question for my guests is, how would you introduce yourself and describe your music? And I am aware that's a hard question.
Hi, I'm Andrea Wolper, and I want to send my greetings to all the listeners and to thank Geisa for doing this wonderful project and for inviting me to be part of it. I'm a jazz singer, a songwriter, and I also teach. I sing in a variety of jazz genres, from straight ahead to more experimental music. Like a lot of jazz vocalists, I started out singing jazz standards, Great American Songbook, that sort of thing, though also, like many, I was influenced by other styles and genres of music. But what's been so interesting for me personally and creatively is that my journey in jazz has taken me places I never really expected to go. After I had been singing in clubs for several years, really thinking of myself as an interpreter of great songs written by other people, I started writing music myself. Some of the music I write uses traditional song form, and some of it is more experimental, in some cases setting poetry to music or creating sonic landscapes for spoken word. I also found myself getting into arranging, often taking a song from Great American Songbook or other genres and giving it my own interpretive perspective. And there's another direction the music took me, which is to spontaneously improvised music. That was not something I had come up listening to, so it was really a surprise. For a while, I was part of a trio called Transformation, which was with my husband, the double bassist Ken Filiano, and the great pianist Connie Crothers. We recorded a CD and we performed several concerts, but Connie unfortunately died in 2016. My life as a performer then here in New York and on tour ranges from doing straight ahead jazz gigs to working with artists doing spontaneous improvisation and a lot that's in between somewhere. The gigs I do as a leader are very likely to include some standards, some original songs, maybe some poetry, some more experimental or improvised work. To be honest, I find it a challenge to describe exactly what I do, so I will quote the writer Don Heckman, who said in International Review of Music that I work in, quote, a milieu that begins with jazz and reaches out to embrace an expressive area that is uniquely her own, end quote.
Wow, that's a very nice description. I like that. And you mentioned poetry, experimental work. So I was wondering, do you have a fixed format for your presentations? Whether you're going to read a text or not, or, this sort of thing.
Sometimes it depends on the setting, the gig itself, or who I'm working with. Last week I had some gigs with my husband from home, and this was right in the midst of the protests after the murder of George Floyd. We felt like we had to respond to what was happening, so we chose music that felt right for that moment. And because it was online, we were also able to include screen shares of quotations that were relevant, including a graphic I made showing the words George Floyd spoke as he pleaded for his life while we were playing music that we felt was reflective.
Oh yes, the protests, they reached Brazil as well, highlighting even more the issues on racism here. Well, as a matter of fact, we are living several crises. Some of them are pandemic, like the COVID-19, and racism, that is also apparently a pandemic thing, and also political crisis. So talk about the perfect storm. But anyway, you are based in New York, and New York is a universe on its own for music, for jazz music. I would like to know in which part of New York you're based and which projects you are currently involved in or were involved in.
I live in Brooklyn, New York, where I was performing in my own project with some of the wonderful musicians here in New York at various clubs and concert spaces. I also have some CDs out and am at work on another one, although now, of course, with quarantine happening, things are on pause. And I do a fair amount of work as a side person as well, performing and recording for other people's projects. That work represents the range of styles as well. For example, I sing with a straight-ahead big band called the Heavenly Band. That group had a CD called Certain Relationships come out, I think about 2 years ago, and I'm featured on several of the songs on that album. The vocal jazz innovator, Jay Clayton, had an ensemble for a while called Different Voices I was in, and we did several concerts here in New York. I performed and recorded with the free jazz icon bassist William Parker. A recording I made with William is coming out later this summer, I think, and we were supposed to go on tour with a different project of his in May, but of course that was postponed. Another recording I'm part of by composer-pianist Bob Gluck was just released. It's called Early Morning Star, and it's a really interesting project. I sang in 3 languages on that one. I also teach singing. I'm highly influenced in my teaching by the great voice teacher Jeannie Lovetre's somatic voice work. And I teach classes and workshops in jazz, performance, improvisation, and so on. I have an online class coming up in July. It's called Scatting the Blues. It's a really nice introduction for people who want to explore scat singing, and it's through the California Jazz Conservatory at cjc.edu. And what else? Well, I've worked for many years, or I did work for many years as a freelance writer and author, and for the last several years, another New York-based singer and I, she's also a professional writer, as well as a singer named Tessa Suter, we've been doing a column in All About Jazz, in which we interview jazz fans. It's on allaboutjazz.com, and it's called Out and About the Superfans.
Wow, all great projects. When you told me about this online class, I thought, what a great idea. I would definitely check it out. And now, apart from the projects that are on hold, what other projects are you develop or has been developing during quarantine time? I mean, the real question is, how are you coping with the quarantine time?
Ooh, that's a big question. There's the personal response and there's what's going on in the world. Well, I'll start with the personal. In the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to attend several artist residencies. These are where artists of different kinds are given kind of a time out of time in another place to just work on their art. And it's been an incredible gift to have. In my experience, it's been from 10 days to 10 weeks of largely unstructured time and space to focus on writing music, studying music, arranging, practicing, all of that away from the normal demands of life. So when quarantine started, I kind of felt like I knew how to handle unstructured time. And I decided that it was a good time to work on some things that I had been wanting to get to but not getting to. So for example, I'd felt for a long time that my website needed to be completely revamped. And so the first week of quarantine, I just jumped in and essentially made myself a new website. My YouTube channel needed to be cleaned up and organized, and I had a bunch of more recent performance videos that had not been titled or uploaded. So I got all that done. Oh, my filing cabinets were a mess, and I completely cleaned those out and reorganized them. I've been practicing music more consistently than ever, checking in more with friends and family more than ever, reading more. So I've been making really good use of this time, but I will say that about 7 weeks in, it really hit me, exhaustion and stress. For one thing, I was dealing with technology more than usual. I had already been teaching some voice students online, but now, of course, all of them. So there was all the technology. But I think also because what I had not done was just taken time to go inward and get quiet and just feel the enormity of what was happening. I kept myself busy, which I think is fine. It's okay. And sometimes when we're dealing with something new and unknown, we are figuring out how to deal with it as we are dealing with it. So that's all fine. And I'm glad that I've accomplished some things and been able to cross some stuff off my list. But I also need to pay attention to other mental and emotional spaces. Anyway, in the midst of all this, my husband and I were invited to do some concerts to be streamed from our home. So that sent us into a flurry of activity on 2 levels. One was figuring out how to make the sound good. We had already seen some streamed concerts where the sound just was not good, and we didn't want to do that. So we really worked hard to get a good balance between us, no distortion, and so on. And it took a lot of trial and error and many test runs, but we did it. We got good sound. And the other thing is that he and I have been playing together in a lot of different settings since a little more than 20 years, but we hadn't been doing a lot of duo gigs. So we had to have several rehearsals to find material that worked well for us as a duo. You know, there are some wonderful bass and voice duos out there. Of course, in jazz, we have the great Sheila Jordan, first with Harvey S. and then with Cameron Brown. And I'm also a fan of the Italian duo Musica Nuda with Petra Magoni and Ferruccio Spinetti. All of these artists make it look so easy, but bass and voice, it's very exposed. So we really did some exploring. And in the end, I think, I was pleased with what we were able to do, and I'm ready to do more. We don't have any more gigs scheduled right now, but I hope something will come along because it was really nice. So that's the more personal stuff, but all of this is happening, of course, against this background that can't be ignored. We're dealing with this pandemic, not knowing what will happen, who will get sick and who won't, who will survive, who won't, How long will we have to stay apart from people? Here in New York, as I know in a lot of places, our jazz clubs, we don't know if they're going to survive. It's just so many questions. And then on top of that, in my country, of course, we're dealing with this fascist takeover in progress. Of course, this didn't happen out of thin air. This current situation is the result of many problems that have been flourishing for far too long. But now we are being taken down a path of such treachery and destruction, and there's this question of whether or not we can stop it and how much we can recover from all of this. And then the third thing, most recently, of course, is this righteous explosion of protests following the murders by police of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, so many others. And people are demanding that this cancer of deadly racism, this soul-killing racism, be exposed and dealt with. I see this as a great thing. I was especially inspired when I saw photographs of people protesting, holding signs saying, "I can't breathe" and "Black Lives Matter" in countries all over the world. This was thrilling to me. So as for the future, I don't know. There's so many questions. Will we change personally and on the larger scale? Will we seize this opportunity to grow into our better selves? Will I get to do the thing I love to do, which is sing in a room with people and for people and feeling that wonderful exchange of energy anytime soon? Will I get to see my family and my friends anytime soon? Will they all be okay? Questions. I don't know the answers to any of them, but I think that deep down I'm an optimist, and so the optimist in me has to believe the answers are yes.
Oh, I was listening to what we were saying. I had this voice here repeating, same thing here, this voice inside my head. Because actually, well, same thing here. I'm also trying to keep myself busy, and I am not sure that this is always the best strategy to be taken. But anyway, I am also, dealing with this certain politic scenario. I mean, dealing with the word pandemic in the everyday news is already hard enough, but then you have also to deal with impeachment, corruption, scandal, and this scent of a fascist takeover, as you so nicely described it. I was also reflecting here from what you said. I don't like when people pretend that everything is nice. I think it's important that we are aware and keep this awareness that things are not all right. That put the word new before normal doesn't make things normal at all. This is not a note to pessimism. On the contrary, I just think that people, they have to be aware that things are not okay instead of denying facts, so that they can work hard on solutions, so that they can come to ways of changing things. Because, I know, we all know that there is a lot to change. And basically because if we don't change, we will disappear. And that's pretty scary, and the task is huge. So that's why I don't like very much when people deny reality and say, oh, that's good, I will just use my mask and now live my normal life, as it used to be. No, it's not possible anymore. There are lots of lessons for society to learn too. Let's at least try to do our best, right? Back to jazz. I love the idea of voice and bass. It sounds so interesting. And Esperanza Spalding came to mind, by the way. And what about Blue Wind, the track we are going to hear? What can you tell us about it?
Well, I chose this song, Blue Wind, for a few reasons. I love the song, and I was happy with the way that our recording came out. And even though this is not one of the songs I wrote, it does illustrate some of my approach to music and to arranging. It's from a contemporary theater piece, a musical called Spring Awakening, with music by Duncan Sheik and lyrics by Stephen Sater. I saw the show when it was on Broadway, and this song jumped out at me. In the show, it's sung very simply and beautifully, but I heard a lot of other possibilities in it, and I came up with this arrangement, reharmonizing it, changing the whole feel, and really from my perspective, expanding on the emotional message and even, I'd say, question. I feel like there's an emotional question in it. And I also chose it for this program because I think it's an example of that sort of expansive space that some of my music exists in that it's a song with a traditional kind of form, but the improvisation is a bit more open and includes some vocalization that is more often heard in free jazz settings. And then also because I find the lyrics to be somewhat impressionistic and even existential, and that just feels right for the moment that we're all in right now. In addition to me on the vocals, the musicians are Chris Davis, piano, Michael Howell, guitar, Ken Filiano, bass, and Michael T.A. Thompson on drums. This is on a CD of mine called Parallel Lives on the Jazz Media label. And if anybody wants to find out more about my recordings or any other activities, teaching or whatever, pretty much everything's on my website at www.andreawolper.com. I just want to say to everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you, Jesa, sending everyone love and good wishes. I hope you enjoy the music.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Andrea, for your words, your reflections. It was really a pleasure having you here in QuaranJazz. This was the 17th episode of QuaranJazz. As usual, I thank you, my dear listener, very much indeed for staying with us. I never thought it would be together this long, but anyway, 17 and counting. I'm Geisa Fernandes, singer, songwriter, music researcher from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, reminding you that there will be a link to my website, geisafernandes.com, in the description of this episode. There will be also a link to my mailing list, which is a faster way to contact me. And, yes, you also get exclusive content. You will also find my profile in all major streaming and social media platforms. Just look for Geisa Fernandes. And last but not least, if you're a jazz musician and would like to know more about jazz festivals, especially those who accept submissions directly from artists, from unmanaged artists, maybe just like you, join the group I've created and manage on Facebook, The Touring Jazz Musician. Find us on Facebook groups and join the discussion. This is Geisa Fernandes saying goodbye. Till next week. And now, ladies and gents, Blue Wind.
haunt you, whistling it's got you, with its heartache, with its sorrow, window and sings and it cries. Whistling, it's got you, with its heartache, with its sorrow, winter wind sings and it cries. Spring and summer, every other day. Blue wind gets so lost, blowing through the thick corn, veils of hay, through the wandering clouds of the dust. Spring and summer. Ooh.
QuaranJazz. Listen while you're home. QuaranJazz, a podcast by Geisa Fernandes.